Howdy, friends and floor heads. It is Friday night when we're playing this live. If you're watching or recording, I have no freaking idea what day it is for you. But we are going to do another deep dive into another adventure site for Forbidden Lands. I'm going to cover Grindbone. I'm going to cover my thoughts on how I'm going to get my players there or entice them there. And a real interesting way to use Grindbone that was given to me by Eric Grandstrom. He and I had a chat a little bit earlier today, and he gave me a little bit of insight of how he got his players to Grindbone, and we'll cover that. I'm going to also kind of hopefully teach you how I break down sites. As I know my players are edging towards an adventure site, I like to get prepared for it, and I have a very particular method. So what we have up on screen right now is Foundry. And you can see I've got Grindbone here. It requires it to be on a river, and it's a bit of a mountainous adventure site, so I've got it near the mountains. If I scroll out a little bit, you can see I've got it kind of in the southern area. Up towards the top here, you can see where my players are right now. They're in Stone Loom Mines. So this is south of Stone Loom Mines down there. And let's go ahead and go to Grindbone. Okay, so the first thing I like to do when I'm looking at an adventure site is to get a sense of the legends and how they get, and suggestions on how they get there. And I may or may not use it. Let's bring up the PDF. Well, before I jump in, Grindbone is interesting for a couple reasons. One, it doesn't have obvious ties to the overarching activities in Raven's Purge. So the big players that are out there, the arcing storylines that are happening as your players are exploring Forbidden Lands, Grindbone doesn't tie into it quite the same way, which initially made me go, I don't even know if I'm going to run this thing. The other thing that's a challenge for me with Grindbone, it may not be for you, is the slavery issue. There are slavers in Grindbone. I, generally speaking, don't incorporate slavery in my games. I think that when I run Grindbone, I will keep the slavers here, but I'm going to in no way be ambiguous how bad they are and what it is. So let's start off with getting here. Now, there's a couple ways they talk about getting here. One is to have your players kidnapped, right? So this ties into the slavery piece. Have one of your players at some point kidnapped and brought to Grindbone, or have all your players captured and brought to by the slaving guild and brought to Grindbone. This is pretty good. What's better, I think, and what is a little interesting is what Eric talked about with me earlier today, which is, and I love this idea, and I'm a little mad that I didn't think of it, because I don't know if I would have changed how I started the stream we have now, but here's what Eric did. He started his entire campaign in Grindbone by having all of his players captured, which is really a neat way to kind of start your Forbidden Lands Raven's Purge adventure, which is you went out exploring, maybe you started from different places. They may or may not know each other very well. And now you're in Grindbone. You are captured. You don't know where Grindbone is. You need to escape and potentially get out of here. So this is an interesting starting point for you. Something to play around with and to think about, and a real easy way to kind of get a campaign started. So first one is to have someone captured. Now we look at the legend. The legend says, Hunter's Whisper of Grindbone, the village of slavers and thieves that lies beneath the forest. Many have heard the cry of the village's mill from the river, but few have dared to approach. It is said that the millstones grind the souls of the enslaved to dust, since slaves have no use for spirituality. Some come to Grindbone through compulsion, others in exultation. There, those captured by the cruel arrive. From there, they are sold by the greedy leave. Okay, so I think I've mentioned I've not used Legends, but this gives me a hint of maybe some rumors that they could hear about Grindbone. And there's a little bit of a challenge with me with Grindbone in the way that I have structured my campaign, because I have only had the mist up for a very short period of time. When my players left their little town of Oakenheart, the mist had only been up for about 6 months. So we're now 7 or 8 months, maybe 9 months before they get to Grindbone. How much activity could have been happening here? Now, I have hinted that the mist did not lift at the same time all across Ravensland. So I think what I would do is make it apparent to my players rather early that down here in the southern regions where Grindbone is, the mist may have been up for a year or two, giving chance for Grindbone to kind of form and to be a center of trade, both for the Thieves Guild as well as the Slavers Guild. Now, usually in the book, it jumps right into the locations, but that's not where I go next. Where I like to go next is I like to go and look at the players. Who's involved? Who are the big NPCs? So I go right to monsters and NPCs, because this is going to give me a sense of who are the big players in Grindbone, which is going to help drive the potential stories we might see come out of play as we go. So we've got Undar, the Duke Alderman. He is in charge of the Thieves Guild. And we make it clear the Thieves Guild is a thug organization. The Duke is mostly interested in devoting himself to his indulgences and counting coins with his treasures. If pressured, he may become unexpectedly decisive and violent. So, the head of the Thieves Guild, the Duke. We've got Misella Farimer. Misella is a down-to-earth slave trader whose house looks like a filthy workshop filled with traps, weapons, branding irons, slave fodder, and the like. A steady stream of slaves, large hunting hounds, and customers move about in the house. The workers lack all refinement but are skilled in their trade. Besides hunting and capturing and delivering slaves, the bone ferrets take on other missions, and that's going to be the bone ferrets are who are the slave traders. So now we've got two big players. We've got Misella as well as the Duke. All right, let's see who else is in here. Third big player is Captain Crotalus, who is basically the village sheriff, the village head of the village militia. He is neutral. There are conflicts between the Thieves Guild and the Slavers Guild, and he kind of tries to stay neutral, tries to keep law and order in hand. Hey, Wanderers Guild, how are you? Welcome. Next, we've got Mahaniver. The bard who runs the village tavern is secretly an acolyte of the Nightwalker, which is really one of the first times we've seen that god really prominent in one of the adventure sites. Who he associates with decay, filth, and mortality. He believes the art should never shy away from the dirty, the crude, the violent, something that all things considered would be an almost impossible feat in Grindbone. The bard's ambition is to offer the humans the most base and filthy entertainment possible, and the kind that all humans deep down want and deserve. So, person running the tavern, bit of a sicko. We've got Matt Zecker, the good-natured carpenter and village idiot. This is now the second time we've seen kind of this village idiot character in Forbidden Lands. We also see it in the Hollows. He is rotund, constantly smiling craftsman who handles repairs for Undar the Duke. He's almost impossible to gain any sensible information from unless he's connected to the purely practical. To help him with his work, he has two unevenly sized sons, but no wife. The sons appear to be almost copies of their father, which is interesting. The Samaya Sisters, Urla, Marla, and Carla. They are the healing witches of the village. They're somewhat predatory and thrilling about them. They are actually Viraga, female orcs from the Urhu clan, posing as humans. They provide the clan with craftsmen and learned slaves whom they abduct from the village. Usually the intended victim is told that they have a disease that they can cure. We've got Pharrell Hamedas. This is an alcoholic elder rust brother Really, the only prominent Rust brother, there's a Rust temple in here. Bit of a drunk comes into play if they visit that church. Now we start getting a little bit interesting. At the very top of Grindbone, there's an abandoned keep. And there we're going to find the ghost of Ariba Mundo. It is rumored that the last mistress of Stonefang, Ariba Mundo, turned down a suitor skilled in the ways of magic. In anger, he cursed her, turning her into a specter. She appears as a translucent, fashionably dressed middle-aged lady. Ariba Mundo isn't the bloodthirsty sort, but longs for love and warmth, which she siphons from visitors who, at worst, might die from feebleness. Hey, Suda. The ghost strongly dislikes the intruders and could reveal her cache of hidden jewelry to anyone who gets rid of it. The mold covering the western parts of the castle is an effect resembling frost that has materialized. Magician suitor added to emphasize the lady's cold intensity. So we got a goal in the keep. On one end, we've got this ghost. On the other end, we've actually got a bloodling, which is, for those of you that are GMs, already know that they are the secret monsters that are in the blood mist. All right, next I go to events. So you'll notice I have not gone to location by location because the reason I don't do that is it doesn't give me the context. By looking at the rumors and what leads us there, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit later about how I would like to lead my players here, and it's part of the events. And then looking at the big players and the events, it gives me the context so that when I'm diving into the particular sections of the site itself, I've got an understanding of the overall picture, and I think it helps me figure out how am I going to run this part of the site, am I going to use this part of the site, and how much of it's going to be involved. Wander Guild, you said the site seems rich with social intrigue, hoping my group gets there at some point. I think there's a lot of potential, right? You've got classic, almost another Hollows in some ways, but a lot nastier and dirtier. You've got two conflicting factions. You've got somebody in the middle of it. You've got Rust involved there. You've got a monster up on the hill. There's some parallels here between Grindbone and Hollows, and you could argue that Grindbone is a much darker version of the Hollows. First one, the slave trader's quandary. The slave trader, Masala, wants a word with the adventurers. She orders her slave hunters to abduct one of them or delivers a mysterious invitation for a secret meeting. She's begun to ponder why she should be playing second fiddle to Undar, the Thieves Guild, when the Bone Ferrets, which are her people, are actually doing all of the hard work. It appears to be great if Alderman would just disappear and allow her to take control of the village. So here we have the slave master, the person in charge of the slave guild, wanting to get rid of the Duke in charge of the Thieves Guild, and there's some conflict. She's either could kidnap somebody to draw them in or potentially try to hire them, depending on your group and the kind of players and kind of characters that they are. This potentially could be a hook for them to get involved. Now we have Showdown at Alderhome, and just for those of you that watch the live stream, I have a hard time believing that my particular group would help her. Showdown at Alderhome. The slave hunter Volm has, after a bout of heavy drinking at the tavern, slain the thief Sile in the center of the village. He has now returned to the tavern to carry out drinking with his friends. To Captain Crutalis, this is a step too far, and he knows that if he doesn't act, the Thieves Guild will retaliate in double measure, and the situation will spin out of control. Thus, Crutalis gathers his men to go to Alderhome to confront and arrest the murderer. Preferably, this happens when the adventurers are visiting the tavern. Now, I will tell you, I like this one. And here's why. We could have the players coming into the center of the village and actually seeing Volm commit the murder, and then just nonchalantly headed back to the tavern, potentially drawing your players to the tavern. They get there, and then we have Crutalis enter and open up. You've got instant potential conflict. It reveals potentially a lot of what's going on. Crutalis could then be a lore dump for the players. Crutalis could come in there, surround it. There's a lot of possibilities there. And you have the ability to create some immediate conflict, which potentially could bring, draw your players in and create some action. So I think I would use this event. I like this idea of this event. All right. So here, the white feather, this is where I think I'm going to use this event as a how to get them there. So if you're watching the live stream, if you're caught up on the live stream, the players, my players, have encountered and somewhat befriended the Raven Sisters, starting with the sister that they met in the Hollows. I'm not going to do too many spoilers because you may not be watching the stream. They ended up coming across a small village of Raven Sisters who were very kind to them before they went into the Stone Loom Mines. I can see a scenario where my players leave the Stone Loom Mines, encounter again, either going back to that village or maybe coming across them out in the wilderness, the sisters, Raven Sisters from that village. And they tell my players about Sister Zagra, who is a shapeshifter, and that she went south, in my case, and she is exploring and kind of keeping an eye on a place called Grindbone. And they can talk about the rumors of what Grindbone is and the evils and stuff that are going down there. We haven't heard from her in a long time, and we're concerned. And if you have it in you, can you go down there and just make contact with her, make sure she's okay? She'll be easy to spot. She will likely be in the form of a raven, but she'll have an obvious white feather in her wing. So now this becomes a way to attract the players, my players at least, to potentially go down to Grindbone. So this encounter is talks about the sister. It's obvious potentially to them that she's not a normal raven because of the white feather, and that she's not feeding on the corpses. She potentially contacts the adventurers when they're alone, inside or outside the village. She may also write simple signs in the dirt with her beak to direct them to a more solitary location where they can talk. She wants their help to free White Sun, a druid from Vivend who has fallen into the hands of the slavers. She gives them her white feather, says if you, soak it and dissolve it in alcohol, it will create a mist that will cover Grindbone, which is your potential in. Love this event. Love this event. Clan Trouble. Just quickly here. Clan Trouble. The young orc, Aranda of the Isser clan, has been beaten by a warrior from the Uhur clan and the clan games. A defeat he won't concede, attributing it to cheating. Now he shows up with 8 armed Isler thugs outside Grindbone, loudly demanding that any dealings in the village between orcs and the Pale Guts must cease. They clamor and wave their weapons about, even go so far as beating up a merchant on his way to the village, screaming that they want to meet the Urhur bitches, which we have learned are those 3 sisters. No one understands what they mean, but everyone starts wondering why Udhar won't sick his soldiers on them when the theater is half-heartedly set on fire in the middle of the night. In the morning, Alderman seeks out the adventurers, asking if they could pay them to take care of the rabble discreetly and in a suitable manner. Aranda is related to the Isler chieftain Elgad, the Rajver, a person the village would rather not risk offending. Undar is actually more scared of the Samaya Sisters inside, being exposed as orc females. So we get the idea there. Definitely some potential there. All right, so those are our events. Now, let's start looking at the individual locations. So you can see on the map here, we've got, much like the Hollows, we've got the river going along the south, we've got a bridge, and then we've got palisades protecting it, a tiered hill system. The geography of this is really, really neat. I love the maps. In this game, it's just so evocative, gives you really kind of a nice look and feel, gives you the information that you need. I love the maps in Foundry because if I go here to bookmarks, I immediately can see all the different site locations and I can bring them up inside of Foundry. If you don't use the Foundry as your VTT when you're running Forbidden Lands, it's worth checking out. Foundry is super cheap. It's a one-time purchase unless you have it hosted by the Forge, and the modules that Free League puts out for Forbidden Lands are cheap, and they are outstanding. In fact, they just released the Book of Beasts one, which I can't wait to incorporate in. I've been manually entering my Book of Beasts stuff in here, but now that I can get the module, I know it's going to be less than $15. It's going to be worth every dime to have that stuff right at my fingertips. So, conveniently, looks like not going to be real easy to get in here unless you get in on this first level here. So let's talk about the gate. So we double click the gate. Grindbone is surrounded by a sturdy palisade equipped with sharpened stakes pointing both inwards and outwards, as the palisade is intended to keep slaves from escaping as much as it is for protection against attacks and rescue attempts from the outside. The lumber gate is open when it is light out, otherwise it is closed. Commander of the garrison, Captain Kurtalis, an officer of the supposed Alder descent, lives in the gatehouse, which is used as an old granary. His 30-odd guards are veteran soldiers, some of who are clanless orcs. The soldiers are quartered in the adjoining barracks, where one can buy a bench to sleep as long as space allows. So, we've got the main gate here. It's large. It's got the gate entrance. It's got a built-in barracks, and it's also where Kurtalis lives. Now, depending on what happens, we may or may not have them coming in that way, but if they do, they have a chance to meet Kurtalis if we want, who again I think is potentially a lore dump person, a person who can set up the conflicts between the Slave Guild as well as the Thieves Guild itself. Wanderers Guild. The Roll20 is fine. I've got no issue with Roll20, but I got to tell you that once I've started learning and using Foundry, it's so hard for me to go back to Roll20. Foundry is just, in my opinion, a more robust VTT. And again, Free League support for it on all of their games is as outstanding. The module for Vaesen is really, really, really good. The Tales of the Loop one is really good. They're relatively cheap. The fan support in the community is outstanding. So there's the main gate. Down here, the Screaming Mill, one of the more interesting locations, and possibly one of the earliest things they're going to encounter even before they get to the gate. The old mill screams in torment day and night, its voice comings with those of the victims. The hill around the mill, the what's shown white with spilt flour, is now dark with dried blood. This will be potentially the first hint of how dark it is inside of Grindbone. From the Grindbone rose a wall, a lamentation over home and square, as Rockla wept for her young at that night. No one could that mother avail, nor relieve her of her despair, for the dark of the grave allows no fight. It's an Aelander slave song. Ooh. Hayworth, that's interesting. You say there's a great module called World Explorer that works amazingly well with Forbidden Lands. I'm going to have to check that out. I've never heard of it. World Explorer, I'm going to definitely check that out. So the old grain mill is mostly used for torture, punishments, and executions to go millin'. It is not something displeasing slaves want to hear. The Slavers Guild excels at finding ways to torment people with it. They tie victims to the paddle wheels, leaving them to be crushed in the millstones or torn to shreds by the machinery after their parts are nailed to the wooden walls. The village slaves are often forced to attend since deterrence is at least as important as the amusement of the slavers. The machinery of the mill creaks and moans loudly around the clock and is deliberately kept in this tortured state. The farms surrounding the village sometimes grind their grains here, but the flour acquires an unmistakable tinge of blood. It is used for baking blood bread. The village's only culinary specialty, the mill is inhabited by Hargan, the torture master, and his 2 apprentices. The mill pond is teeming with fish. All right. So, a couple things. I think it would be interesting as another foreshadowing or hook as they're approaching. Grindbone. Have them encounter a village, a family living out on a farm, a couple miles or kilometers outside, and they're served this blood bread, and it tastes funny. You potentially have somebody with a nature background or a medical background, maybe can pinpoint the blood flavor, but questions about the bread say, yeah, it's something that we pick up from Grindbone, which is a village close to here. It's a potential really neat little foreshadowing that can be used. I think overall, this millstone should be played up big time and has a ton of potential to really creep the crap out of your players. I will make it, and I will hint that there is an otherworldly nature to the sounds that come from this thing. That it almost sounds like souls screaming. And there's the smell of a meat house, right? If they've gone to the Palisades, they've already seen that there's hands hammered around the gatehouse, and that this place is nasty. If they know that this is where slavers are, they may already know where they're headed. But this place, I think, can be played up big time, and you can potentially get a lot of mileage. My recommendation is, even though there's nothing supernatural happening here, hinting at it, making them think it's going to be there, and then not delivering that, then means the next time you hint at supernatural things, you have a bit of a surprise when maybe it really is supernatural. All right. So let's now go in. We've got two areas here on the front. We've got the slave square, and then we have the slave stables. Let's start with the stables. Misery drapes flesh behind double fences where a score of dirty, half-naked prisoners linger in apathy, each left to his or own devices, unless they've been chained to stakes or confined behind bars in the caverns of the cliffside. A couple of furious dog-like beasts, these things are really cool, bay incessantly with unpleasant sniveling barks. Really play up just the despair, the enslavement, the encampment aspect of this. The slaves are treated and lodged by their value. The precious ones are kept in filthy barracks, while the more expendable ones are confined to cages or holes carved in the hillside. Now, depending on your players, I think you'll want to present this as the 3 of you, 4 of you, 5 of you, how many players you have. You will be overrun here. So you don't really talk about the guards. I would have this place teeming with guards. I would really play up the swine hounds, which are these nasty beasts that these slavers have. Use this as a deterrent from, I'm just going to go in and free all the slaves, because that's, that's what many of them would want to do, but maybe something that they want to do as a long-term goal. So they can't go in swords blazing, but now some of the players might say, we're not leaving here until we take care of this situation. Slave Square. The theater, with seating built into the hillside, could be a place for classical drama if it weren't for 3 stakes on the stage whose chains mournfully jangle in the wind. The Slave Square is an open area where seating has been built into the hillside like an amphitheater. Common spectators have to stand on the flatlands to the south side. The middle of the square is a raised surface where slaves are auctioned off. Now, and it also talks about they have fighting bouts there as well. I think that, again, depending on the time of day, I would probably have this be an active auction. So I would have people there standing, buyers sitting in the amphitheater, slaves being auctioned off. These are opportunities for the players, if they were to interact with the crowd, to hear a lot about the rest of Ravensland. Keeping in mind, for me, I'm going to have this area have been much longer free of the mist than where my players came from. Also, Could be very haunting and evil to have it empty. So it really kind of depends on what you want to do here. But I think this has play. All right, so we've got this main road that comes up. Let's do this. Let's go over here. Let's talk about Paraxa Theater. Torches have been lit for the night around an outdoor theater. It endeavors to be grander than the farce being enacted on stage. The audience have brought food from the tavern and chuck it at the actors if they displease them. This has so much potential. Theater Paraxa is an outdoor stage with bleachers built into 3 sides. Here, anything from farces to folksy theater and the occasional duel are performed. Mahaniver likes to view himself as a great artist and performs poetry of high gravitas during the interludes. The good-natured fool, carpenter, and village idiot Matt Zecker takes care of maintenance here as well as in the tavern. So we've got the bard, and we've got Mahaniver and Matt. So here's, again, another opportunity for them to interact with the crowd, interact potentially with Matt Zecker, which is another potential mouthpiece for lore. I've also thought that if my players get close to here, that I will sit down and basically put together what the play is, this farce. Because that also could reveal things to the players about the overall things happening here. So a farce about Zygofer or Zertome or even Marigal. So think about that. If your players are going to be here, get close to here, you have potential here. If they get drawn into this play, into this production here, it could be another place where you can convey information, hints and rumors, lore dump, without it being you found a book. All right, up here we have Hop's Shed. The rich mist of malting and mashing surrounds the village brewery. Hop poles stand at attention outside. Next to the house are shimmer copper pans and as well as a stack of lumber and kegs. Water for the brewery uses a pulley system that takes it from the river through a track that runs along the hillside. The beer is brewed in middling quality, but in great quantity and is consumed locally. Hops are cultivated around the brewery and the grains from malting are taken from the farms surrounding the village. The brewer is commonly referred to as the boar. So, good point, Ro. You could definitely have the Thieves Guild interested in Stanagist. Now, I would be tempted, though, for them to be looking at it strictly as a value thing, right? Not potentially using Stanagist as what it's kind of being as a MacGuffin, right? But they could, again, be a source. They could also be a potential source for more information on other Elven rubies that are out there. So here in this Hop Shed, the one thought I had would be interesting here is, depending on what the situation is in the Hollows, having some sort of trade happening with the Hollows could make sense. Having somebody from the Hollows here, working with the boar, trading with the boar, having a relationship with the boar could be interesting. And a lot of that depends on if your players have been to the Hollows. If they haven't, this is a potential way to get them to the Hollows or let them know the Hollows exists. The immediate thing I thought of with this Hop Shed is a way to tie it to the Hollows. All right. So our Chapel of the Rust Brothers. Here's where we have our drunk Rust brother, Hamadas. Hamdas. I don't know. A simple temple bearing the typical cloven facade of the Rust Church. Standing outside the temple are blood-stained idols of the gods Rust and Hem. Now, this is pretty interesting. The Chapel of the Rust Brothers is the only visible religious operation in the village. The Duke, Alderman, regularly donates or gifts slaves for human sacrifice to the fairly crudely shaped idols outside the chapel. For all, Hamadas is gravely alcoholic, and this has landed him in not so glamorous of the village priest in Grindbone. He frequently sleeps it off inside the temple, and the soldiers avoid the building. So in case we thought just the slave trader, the woman that are running the slaves, was bad, this is a way to say, yeah, the Duke is pretty bad too. He's sacrificing slaves here. Now, we also, again, another parallel to the Hollows, we have a Rust brother here. Now, those of you know that my Rust brother was less than devout in the Hollows. Here we have definitely an exiled brother. And this could be a potential point to the headquarters and give information on the Rust brothers. He could potentially be a source of lore dump about the Rust brothers because he seems to be a bit fallen, definitely an alcoholic, and not the same type of threat that our friend up in the Hollows was. All right, we've been dancing around it. Let's go to the tavern. It's the largest building in the village, and it blares and blazes even at the distance. The repurposed barn is packed with drunk and disorderly soldiers and merchants. The air is heavy with smoke, sweat, and the smell of frying. Here you can glut, booze, and laugh, throw knives at terrified slaves, argue, arm wrestle, and fondle the staff. This is not a cool place. I think it needs to be portrayed that way. I will do everything I can to make my players both enraged and uncomfortable with the happenings that are going on here. Again, a very stark contrast to what they encountered in the Hollows. The tavern is owned by Undar, but like the nearby theater, is run by the bard. The atmosphere is savage. The waiting is partially performed by badly treated slaves. If a fight ensues, tradition dictates that it is taken to the slave square to be settled in front of an audience. Visitors can rent beds to the adjacent buildings. Behind Alderhome is the infirmary of the three wise Samaya Sisters. They take care of the healthcare needs of the village. So here's our sisters, and here's our tavern. Lots of potential there. Our sisters, of course, are in the back. Ferret Hall. A couple of scared soldiers and rangers mill about the well-timbered house. The grease chained shackles and weapons that are then packed into the satchels. They act professionally severe, keeping an eye on you with a look that is more appraising than welcome. So here we've got swinehounds, we have got the slave hunters, we've also got Masella. This is the haunt of the company of slavers known as the Bone Ferrets, a group of 20 or so hardened soldiers and hunters, of which half are usually away from the village in different missions. The company is run by Masella, from whom it gets its name. She is rumored to have contacts among the Wolfkin in Fangwoods, who lend their tracking skills to her soldiers. The ferrets also keep their own hounds used for hunting humans. I have, in my world right now, none of my players are Wolfkin, and they have yet to encounter Wolfkin. If that stays true, then I do think the Bone Ferrets, being a mixture of humans and Wolfkin, and leveraging Wolfkin and connection to the Wolfkin, this could be a great place to introduce Wolfkin to the players, them that not being more than legend, that they're an actual thing. Okay, then right across the street, we've got Guild Hall. The house is relatively well kept and the only one in the village to have been painted. The color scheme consists of equal parts red, lead, black tar, and oiled whitewash. Maybe the homeowner only managed to secure one keg of each shade, or maybe it's just ostentatious. 2 guards stand outside the door. Hayward, yeah, it's a shame to me that there aren't many connections to the Wolfkin in the campaign. I definitely understand that. I struggle with a Wolfkin. I know I would have been fine if one of my players chose to be Wolfkin, and if one of, if they end up bringing up needing a new character and it's Wolfkin, I mean, I will figure this out. But the Wolfkin are very, very interesting because they weren't as affected by the mist. They are visibly non-human. And it's hard to understand, or you have to, not hard to understand. a lot of thought needs to go into it as the GM and the world builder, how the wolfkin are perceived and treated. What happens when a wolfkin walks into the hollows? Is it, oh, just another wolfkin? Or is it, ooh, I've heard of these things. They are supernatural. They're potentially, evil. They're demonic, right? I don't know. And I've, at this point, have not had to think about it. So I haven't. I've left it kind of flexible and open. But deciding where wolfkin fit into this world, I think, is an important decision. And part of it is I'm not a big fan of evil races and that concept in fantasy, and I would not want to portray wolfkin that way. In fact, if this is the first introduction of wolfkin to my players, I will very quickly and soon afterwards have them encounter a wolfkin that doesn't work with slavers, just to balance it out so that they don't get this idea that wolfkin as a race or as a heritage or a kin are in any way tied inextricably to slaving. So here we have the Duke, right? So here's where we have the Thieves Guild. We have some treasure in there. I think really depending on how things are playing out, this may or may not be a significant location depending on what they're going to do with the Duke and what they're going to do with the slavers. All right, so now we go to our last location. This is going to be the beacon that draws them. Your players are going to want to go here. The player characters may not want to, but they want to. I have been thinking about how I want to handle the keep. I am thinking that this is going to be a place that is rumored to house great and ancient treasures, but that even the Thieves Guild stays away from it. That it is haunted and by the living and the dead, and really play this up as Creepville. Just catching up on chat real quick. Anyone remember Stargate Atlantis? The character Ronan Dex, played by Jason Momoa, would have been my template for a wolfkin. Good call, Ro. I could see that. Since the Rust Brothers could also move in the mist, I made them sometimes allies that would hire wolves as witch sniffers. Ooh, that's interesting, Wanderers Guild. That's very interesting. Again, though, tying them to the Rust Brothers, I think it would be important to me. I just, and again, this is just me, right? I don't give a flying rat's butt what you do, but it would be important to me that goblins, orcs, elves, wolf, all the different kins, I would never want to present them as caricatures, two-dimensionals. I would really, every kin involved, I want them to be intricate and interesting. I was happy with really the first introduction of the dwarves that I did in the Hollows. I think I've made the dwarven kin introduction complicated. One of my players is a halfling, and that's already been presented as a somewhat complicated kin there, but there's a really good, if you go to Drive-Thru RPG, there is a really good fan-made adventure site called Root Home. I encourage you to check it out. It's less than $10. I think it's less than $5. And it is essentially a giant tree that is inhabited by mostly halflings. And there's stuff going on there that is a lot darker than it initially seems. I think it's a really interesting adventure site. I have put Root Home in my world, and they may or may not get there. In fact, if you've paid attention, it's been hinted at a few times in conversations. People have talked about to Vasilla, the halfling, your people have collected to the north by the Great Tree. Highly encourage you to check that out. I wish I had it handy with me. I'd give credit to the person who wrote it. But it's a good adventure site, really good adventure site. All right, let's track a little bit. So I'm portraying this Stonefang as a really creepy place. May end up deterring him from going there. May draw them depending on what you want. But what we have here is happening are two things. The castle ruin, as impressive as it is dilapidated and ominous, towers over Grindbone. Rumor has it that it is haunted and devours its visitors, so most people avoid talking about or even looking at it. This, I think, you could get a ton of mileage out of. What's the deal with that keep up there? We don't talk about the keep. Right? You could really play that up, build a lot of anticipation and mystery around this thing as they're going around Grindbone. I agree, Sidewinder. Eric did a great job of making all of his kin equally horrible. And I want to continue that, right? When I bring this to the table, for my goblins, my orcs, my elves, all the different kin, I want them to be equally good and horrible, equally complicated, because I think Eric put a lot of thought into that. And it was one of the things that right out of the gate that made me say, I like this game. I like this setting. The Ruin of the Keep of Stonefang was the original structure on the hill, a fortification at times of unrest. The keep is now a ruin of ill repute. Wagons loaded with beer are hauled from the brewery to the ruin, where the beer is stored under guard in the cool lower vaults. The ruin is haunted twofold, in part by the ghost of Ariba, and who's the last mistress of the castle. We've already learned about her, and this is, by the way, why I read the NPCs first, because now I already know about her, already know her deal. But also by a bloodling who is taking residence on the east side and causes red mountains of water to flow down the hill. The frost of the west side is actually stone mold, and nearby ruin of the watchtower is used by the soldiers as a lookout at the daytime. So much potential happening here. We've only got a paragraph or two. Look at the size of this thing. You could make this multi-session of a location. You could have the mystery of the wagons, of the ale going up and being stored there, coming back from there. The fact that it's a lookout and a central place of control used by the militia to keep their eyes on everything around there. But don't go too deep, don't go too high. And you just have a ton of potential there. All right, so let's take a step back. I mentioned that I struggled at first thinking about Grindbone because there's nothing. We've gone through the NPCs, we've gone through the sites. There's nothing really Zertomish in here, no Zygerfer stuff in here, and minimal Rust Brother activity. So if we're hot and heavy and really not a site where I think I would leave a Ruby, though you may want to put one up in the keep. That has possibilities, I think. Though I don't know if I'd do that, but there's nothing like that's not a bad choice. Not a bad choice. What I think I would use this place for, definitely testing the honor and the heroic tendencies of your players. I think more than anything, what Grindbone does as a place that is gathering the seedy and the nasty and the ugly of Ravensland is you can use Grindbone as a way to greater inform your players about what's going on in Ravensland, what's potentially going on in the Raven's Purge story, introducing characters, introducing conflicts. I thought, what if a beloved character that your players have encountered showed up here? I have a few ideas of somebody being seen as enslaved here that has previously been somebody who our players are fond of. That could also be very interesting. I think for me, the biggest hook here, though, is that Raven sister who is a shapeshifter in the form of a raven. Right. That's me and Grindbone. Real big thank you to the patrons. I knew I wanted to do a stream tonight. I was debating all kinds of different things to do it. they wanted to hear my thoughts on Grindbone. So this is a direct request for my patrons who are the only reason the Third Floor Wars is able to put out stuff. So hats off to my patrons and everybody in our Discord. It is a phenomenal community. And it's I think the minimum to join the Discord and to get all the benefits is $1 a month. So if you want to swing by patreon.com, that'd be great. So big thank you to those guys. I'm not quite sure what adventure site I'm going to do next, but by all means, go to the playlist on GM tips for running Forbidden Lands, which this video is in. I have got all deep dives on a lot of other sites. One of the deep dives that I had mentioned before that I'd forgotten about, that one of my patrons brought up that I definitely am going to start planning out, is a deep dive on travel, how I handle travel. It's different now than it was 30 sessions ago for me. I've got some really more baked thoughts on getting the most out of travel. I've loved the travel mechanics in this game from the beginning. I love the premise of exploration in this game, but I think I could offer some potential tips and tricks on making travel even more interesting and more engaging for your players. All right, like, subscribe, do the whole thing. Go to patreon.com. If you don't listen to the podcast, I've interviewed Eric Gronstrom. I talked to Eric earlier today. He's going to come back on the show to talk about not Book of Blood, but another little whole entire a Raven's Purge level book that he put out. And I'm anxious to talk to him about it. I've started reading it. It's really, really interesting. It's far more mature than Bitterreach and Raven's Purge. I think it's the best work so far. It is very tempting for me just to push everybody there because I think there's some really interesting stuff there. He'll be back on the show. We've already talked about booking him again to talk about it. All right. Great seeing everybody in the chat. I appreciate all of you watching. I'll catch up with all of you patrons in the Discord. And as of this release, both Book of Beasts, which I did a deep dive on, you should go check it out, and Blood March, they're both out. Make sure you go check out both books. They are phenomenal. Take care, all. Howdy, friends. Thank you for watching. All our content is archived and organized in playlists on the Third Floor Wars YouTube channel. Check it out. And if you could like, follow, subscribe, and even set your notifications to this channel on YouTube and Twitch, we'd appreciate it, and it'll make sure that you catch all of our content. I talk with creators, designers, and experts across the gaming landscape in every episode of our podcast, Tabletop Talk. Open up your favorite podcatcher and search for Tabletop Talk from Third Floor Wars. Support your creators. They make the content you love, and it's your support that makes it happen. If you want to help us, go to Third Floor Wars on patreon.com, and you can help us for as little as $1 a month. Thanks again. We'll see you next time. Take care.